to you. I'm in Cyprus, in Nicosia, as you know. I'm a theatre director. I have my own company called Fantastico Theatro, but I'm also a co-artistic director and co-founder of a feminist theatre project called Project Season Women, which started last March, in March 2019, and gives a platform and voice to a theatrical narrative from a female perspective, examines the social position of women through theatre, through many educational events such as talks, workshops, masterclasses, and collaboration with activists and gender experts. We commission new work, we do productions, we do everything, and we it's 3 women running it, myself, another director, Athina Gasiou, and Nedi Antoniadis, who's also, she's an actress. We're all 3 of us went to the US for our theatre studies. Of course, we noticed that with the arrival of COVID-19, women's rights, we saw worldwide where sort of took a step back, and now an interesting detail for you. Now Cyprus has just exited the lockdown, so we've sort of flattened the curve almost. Okay, so we in March, we were sort of preparing for this, for the summer and for autumn, which are the 2 busiest times of the year for theatre artists. And, you know, we had all these amazing projects lined up. We are researching untold stories of women, and we are thinking about the refugee crisis and many things like you, and then suddenly everything stops. And now, okay, it's a small country, it's an island. Of course, now we'll see now they opened the airport, so I don't know what will happen in the winter, but for now we're good. And we're thinking of what to do as theatre artists in the next few months. And we're at this turning point, like today, like at this crossroads. I mean, we have to continue giving a platform to the underrepresented. I think it's become even more pressing. I mean, of course, in every country, but I can tell you, in my country, we saw we had incidents of domestic violence. We had disappointing behavior, and so not just disappointing, but terrible behavior in terms of there was an incident of pushing back a boat of refugees, which is illegal. I mean, I know it's happening all over the Mediterranean now, but it also happened once here with the pretext of COVID. You know, so we're at this point where, I mean, it's literally today, there's an opening of a play after all these months, and we're gearing up to go back to the rehearsal, maybe even wearing masks or thinking what to do. But the trauma is really recent, and I think we all need to be thinking about all the social inequalities and sort of dark holes that were exposed through the pandemic. So this is where I am now. But you should ask me questions, because it's going to turn into a monologue.
Yeah, no, I love the monologue. So please feel free to expand on any thoughts that you have. So a question. So where were you the moment you realized that COVID-19 would be a game changer? And I'm not saying just only physically, but also mentally, and how that, and what was the impact of it?
So the impact was gradual. It's hard to pinpoint a day where you realize how serious it is, because for theatre people, for me, it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Like with all theatre people around the world, I think, when you realize that it's not just a postponement of your job for like in the next, it could be a serious kind of change in your life, in the way you do your work, and also there was an existential crisis. So what happened was, I remember I was walking in the street, and I had a really busy summer ahead of me. I was going to direct an opening of a film festival, and I was going to do this big kind of feminist happening in which with like maybe 100 women, you know, things that are impossible at the moment. And I don't know when, because I was going to do something about the underrepresentation of women in the film industry, and something about the Bechdel test, and I was going to dramatize that. I was going to do like a happening with women describing sexist behavior in movie sets. And I was talking on the phone with the organizers, and then in the next hour, we realized that we have to go home and like not leave the house, or, you know, for a bit. And then I had the same day I had a meeting with actors about to start rehearsals. So it was all these projects that started, they kind of stopped, and then we thought, okay, well, we'll do them. If we can't do them in March, we'll do them in April. And then you realize, you know, you can't do them in April. Maybe we'll do them in September. And then you're like, well, maybe not, because unless they get a vaccine, how are you going to do them in September? So it just kept getting worse and worse. And then despair followed because of how we were treated by the government, who basically forgot about us. They talked about, I don't know, how they're going to reopen. If people can go to church, if people can go to the beach, if people can go to the casino, to the restaurant. Nobody talked about the theater. People were talking about, oh, the football season is going to be cancelled. Nobody was talking about the theater for a while. So the artists started getting organized and demanding action. So it was, I can't remember another time in my life where I had so many different reactions, so rapid changes of realization. I mean, it's something new for all of us. I mean, sometimes it was heartbreaking, but then also, it's weird that I say this because of all the human suffering and the human cost, but for me, this period then after the initial existential crisis and despair became very, very productive and very fertile period. I had time to read and write like I've never had before. As a freelancer, as you know, we never have time. You know, we're rushing from job to job to make a little bit of money, you know, in the theater, and we have to write grants, and we have to organize, and we have to direct, and we have to produce, and everything. So it was time to read and to really think about what we should be talking about. And then I found myself not feeling sorry for the projects that were cancelled, because I realized maybe we need to go even deeper and do something even more meaningful when we can. And I started working and reading and studying, and it was really great. But now today, like you talked to me today, and I just had my first meeting for a job and phone calls for other jobs, and people in my country are trying to go back to normal, and I'm a bit disappointed with that. I think we should not try and recover the projects that were lost. I think we need to be doing new projects. But at the same time, we have a serious problem of survival. I survived from my job, so it's hard to say no when you've had no job for so long, and then suddenly you have the privilege of, because I know that other theatre artists in other countries don't have that. I mean, Cyprus, we didn't have a huge problem because we're a very small country, and we took measures immediately and like really strict. So it was a complete lockdown, like right away, and then. So we're lucky in that, but I also think what are we gonna be doing plays about. I think it's something that worries me, and I was thinking a lot about migrants in in the lockdown, because I'm researching some ancient myths, because I also have a classics background, that have to do with the Mediterranean, migrants in the Mediterranean in ancient times, and how this is an area that was developed through migrants, and the hospitality of migrants and the foundations of so small colonies and cities was what made classical civilization so great. And I'm really interested in telling that story, not from such a European perspective, but from a Near Eastern and African perspective. And because the Mediterranean, I think, was such a great civilization in classical times, not just because of the Greeks and the Romans, but also because of all this cultural exchange that was going on for so long. And, I'm Greek Cypriot, you're Italian, how we learn about the classical world only through Greece and Rome. So there's so much emphasis on that, but there is another story, and I was working on that over my sabbatical in March and April. And now I find myself at this crossroads. Do I go back to the projects now that I can, because who knows what's going to happen after September, because we might have a second wave? Do I continue? Yeah, I'm working on a kind of a similar thing as you, maybe but from another angle, from an ancient angle. So this is where I am, and every day is different.
So you have this dilemma of not wanting to go back to the normal, because the normal probably is not acceptable anymore.
Exactly.
And then that of creating new world, going a different direction, reshaping a present different from what it was before. So so it's a dilemma, because you want to survive as an artist, you need to do work, and probably some of the work means going back to what you were doing before. That is less appealing in this moment.
Yeah.
But if you did not have to do that, let's imagine something that can become reality. Let's say that you can do these new projects. You can give a new shape to the work that you're doing for your country, for your own journey as an artist. What would you be talking about? So you mentioned about your classical experience and knowledge. So let's say it's possible. What is it that you're going to do?
I think it's important now to do collaborations to create new work with playwrights, dramaturgs, and directors. I think we need to put money on research and to fund research. We need to think about theatre economics and structures a little bit differently. I know it's really difficult because there are the problems of the theatre buildings and theatre companies with buildings, and the economics of that, and the people who work there. And the system now is structured to support this kind of economy. And I think we need to rethink that a bit more. I know this is hard because there are people whose job depends on that, or on sustaining the economics of a theatre building, of getting people in seats. I do think, though, that theatre needs to rethink its position in the community as a very vital part of the community, as a tool to affect change. And I think maybe that needs to, so for that reason, maybe we need to get more people involved that are non-professionals but experts in other fields. We need to be, there need to be opportunities for funding for, as I said, for research and for outreach and for development. It's pointless to try and support the theatre buildings if in 30 years there's a climate collapse and we all just, or we know that there are some open wounds in our societies that were there before COVID-19. It was the refugee problem and the crisis and the climate emergency. And they just were exacerbated by the pandemic. the climate emergency became even more obvious because the minute we stayed at home, we could see the sky, and then in the Mediterranean, terrible things happened with the COVID as a kind of an excuse. So, and of course in the US you have other problems with South America, and you have a government that has, we know all of that. So we need to be really, I think, focusing on our attentions on social change. We will continue with Project Season Women. We will continue to do work that is feminist, and we don't want to stop. We have a series of Zoom talks starting today, every Monday or Tuesday in June, with activists, actors, and directors and collaborators talking about theatre for the underrepresented and theatre as a tool for social change, and talking with people from abroad as well. We're thinking of doing radio plays in the winter and autumn if we're preparing for the eventuality that theatres will be closed again after September, because now we're about to open for tourists, so we don't know what's going to happen. So we're about to open the country, the airport, so we don't know. And I think it's important to stay active. The survival problem is a reality. So people were fighting for an artist grants from the government, like a little bit of money to support artists in crisis. We were given very, very little. We will see what happens. I mean, it was like a stipend for the 3 months, for 2 months, because people do need to survive. So it is all in all a really difficult situation for those who are freelancers. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the jobs that I can now and prepare for the winter to continue with Project Season Women, doing feminist plays, doing giving voice to women and thinking about the underrepresented in general, and to continue research for theatre for social change and social impact. I don't think we have a choice, because I think it became so obvious that we were just going down a really dangerous path with the speed we were moving at, the stress, the complete disregard for the environment. So it's important to take a lesson from that. And again, even as I say that, I realize that there's so much going on in America on the issue of race at the moment, and the society is in upheaval because of that. People are in the streets. It's a completely different experience too. So I think we need to be responsive to that, open as artists to receive, to see what's going on historically at this juncture, and try to process that and work for a social impact. I don't know if we can expect from our governments any real support anywhere in the world. I mean, there's just, soon it's going to be, the financial crisis globally, so I don't think we're going to be a priority. I mean, I think, sadly. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a reality that I hear from many of us. What can we do in this moment to change that reality? Sorry. Specifically, you said the government probably is not going to be thinking about us, because as obviously it seems that there are other priorities, and this is true everywhere. So what can we do as artists to change those priorities? Because it is a fact that without even the practice of the arts, people would not have survived emotionally, psychologically being locked down in their houses. There has been a spike in people singing and writing and painting and writing and reading and anything and dancing. Any kind of artistic expression has been a tool for survival.
Yes.
And we are, don't you think that we are in a position of, at least within our communities, to point that out? And in your idea of rethinking the position of theater within the community, making that a political statement that would force politicians to acknowledge the place of arts in society.
Yeah. Yes, I think that we have to be smart about who we get on our side, I think. I mean, there are two things. There's social media, which is it can be very impactful. I think that's how awareness was raised for the artists here when there were all these measures taken by the government, really good, quick measures at the beginning and nothing for the arts. So there was a movement of social media, and then they sort of grudgingly gave 900 euros to the art, which is very little, but it was more than nothing. So then secondly, as organizations, I think we need to be, we need to find the people who have a social consciousness and believe in the arts as an end in themselves, and understand the power that we have, because we do have a platform and we do have some power. So we can bring people together from different fields. I found that in Project Season Women, because it's stated clearly from the beginning, we are a feminist project, we were able to reach NGOs, activists, people even from inside the government who were interested in what we do. So I think we need to be smart about who we bring close to us, I think, and work for people who care about making a change. And there are people in several fields. Maybe there are not many of them, but if we find them, I think we should collaborate. We maybe find a spirit, in a spirit of collaboration, we can increase the impact that we have, and as artists, and convince those that we need to convince that arts do have power. It's interesting because tonight when we have this Zoom call, we're going to be talking about that. We're talking with activists and theatre people about how can these two fields come together to create more impact, to expand the audience, and to make a difference, to make a change. At the same time, I think, as you said, creativity is never going to stop. I do think it's an end in itself. I think life has been hard always, and we do make life beautiful through the arts. So I think nobody's going to stop us from creating work. But it is frustrating when you feel you're not a priority, you're not important. I think it's just a consequence of a general democratic crisis. I think there's a crisis at the moment everywhere. So the arts suffer when that happens, because theater is a tool for revolution. It's a democratic tool. It brings people together. It's like so of course it's going to have problems when democratic institutions are kind of shaky.
I understand. Well, before we close, I have 2 points I would like to talk with you. So you said I had this existential crisis, mm-hmm. and then after I came out of this crisis, I had this productive and fertile period. I would love to know what happened in that period that was productive and fertile. Where was your mind, your creativity? Why you define this fertile productive?
Because being unemployed, I had time to focus on the projects that I loved. I mean, there were things that I didn't find them in the lockdown. There were things that I had in my mind for a long time that I never had time to develop because we're going from job to job. We get commissioned. So, or there are things that are too ambitious and you don't have time to develop them. And that was one thing. And the other thing, there was a huge amount of stimulation in this tragedy. For me, I made a short film with 3 minutes just responding to that. I read, I started writing because there were so many things that after the initial shock, I wanted to process. I was trying to find myths and prototypes to process them through, and I was trying to write and read to process what was happening, because reality seemed to be very fluid. I couldn't believe everything that was being said. Every day was a different information. Even now, the way the media was reporting on this was weird. The way people are behaving doesn't really make any sense. One day we were being told you can't go to the beach, and the next day the beaches are full with 1,000 people just because, so it was all a bit like a Beckett play. I don't know, it was really weird. And then there were, for example, the relationship to the older generations to me was, just an example, to give an example, that to me was a huge traumatic moment, and like a huge revelation for our societies, the free Western societies, for example. So there was, you probably heard that there was, many people put forth the idea that it's better to sacrifice the senior citizens rather than stop the economy. Things like that. And then we know that most of the victims are over 60. And then we realize that half of the victims in Europe are in old people's homes, and the people die alone. So to me, that was like a horrible thing. It showed the cruelty of the system and inhumane, and the inhumanity of it, the lack of humanity. So I was reading up on ancient myths that sort of had something to say to me about that, because the way we treat our old people, and the way we treat our migrants, and the way we treat our guests, I think are foundational pillars of our civilization. And the respect, the intergenerational respect, and then the hospitality of the strangers. These are what I think, they're foundations of our civilization, and they were kind of collapsing during the lockdown. We were so apart. People were literally a danger. You could, and also how we treated the refugees, and then how we were treating our old. And in my country, it's a Mediterranean country, we're really close to our older people. They take care of us, they cook for us, the grandma takes care of the kids so we can work. It's a very close-knit Mediterranean society. And suddenly we couldn't see them, and it was really depressing for everybody. And then some people died, and they died alone. And then you saw that in England or in Scandinavia, even more people died alone because they were in homes. So that was very stimulating to me. And when I get angry about things, when I get really angry, I try to look for examples from myth, from the classical literature, from the canon, or from philosophy, or from people before, to see, to kind of to try and make sense of it at first, and then I start trying to process it, try to make it into art, try to get. The only thing that I could do was read, write, and call my close collaborators so that we could have these little hubs of creativity in the lockdown and talk about things that we found especially traumatic, and see how we can express them in future projects for the stage. I just hope that we're able to do that and not to go back to just, let's try and get a few plays in while we can in our open amphitheaters, because we have open amphitheaters, we're in Cyprus, and then we'll see. I think we need to be talking about these things. Yeah, I think that's what we do with trauma. Artists tend to do that, I think. So that's what I did.
So tell me a little bit more about these myths that you are talking about. One of the analyses that I have read, I am also someone that uses mythology in my work, and I know how mythology is important, because it is ultimately is a story in which men try to make sense of nature, try to make sense of the world. There's also a fact that it seems that some of those myths have disappeared, that the world, and Joseph Campbell says that, the problem of the world is that we don't have any more myths that allow us to go from a cycle of our life into another cycle of our life. Myths that help us understand what is happening and make sense of it through the creation of the story, and then the creation of the story becomes a ritual, and then the ritual is repeated to create, this an environment. That's how I understand mythology. So what were those myths that allow you to understand or make sense of the reality as you were living? And yeah, let's start from that.
Well, I was reading about, I was thinking, I came on this one myth I'm going to talk about. I came on it by accident. I was reading about something else. I was trying to think about heroes, because I was thinking a lot about heroism in the time of COVID-19, in people in the front line, people who had to keep working while we stayed in our shelters, people who were in the hospitals. I was trying to think about heroes, and then my reading brought me to a myth that I once did as a play, 10 years ago. As I did an adaptation of Ovid's Metamorphoses in 2009. And one of the myths that I chose, and I came back to it over the lockdown, and I did a short film on it, is the myth of Philemon and Baucis. Do you know this myth?
Yeah, but could you summarize it for our audience?
So one night, Jupiter and Mercury, the gods, Zeus and Hermes, they go down to the earth to visit a small town in Phrygia, and they are disguised as foreign travelers, and nobody lets them in. Everybody shuts their door to their face. They send them away, and they don't give them shelter. And everybody except at the edge of the town, the smallest little hut, where this really old couple live, Philemon and Baucis. They're really, really old. They lived there all their lives, and they're really poor. They open the door and they let them in, and they give them all their food. They wash their feet. They give them a couch to sit. They bring out everything they have in their pantry, and they don't ask any questions, and they give them, and then the gods at the end reveal themselves, and they say, "We are the gods, and thank you for your hospitality. The town is going to be flooded. It's going to be, but you will be saved for your kindness. And what else can we do for you for showing us such a warm hospitality?" And they say, "We don't need anything. We want to die together. We want to die on the same day. We don't want one of us to stay alone." So that really resonated with me, and because dying alone was this terrible, it was a big part of this nightmare that we were going through during the lockdown, during the disease. People did die alone, far away from their children and their loved ones. And also hospitality. how we treated foreigners and strangers, and what the old have done for us. So to me, that myth spoke on many different levels. And that was, for example, one thing. And there were many other little things that kind of became the seeds to create new projects, to create new plays. Now I'm reading about I'm reading about the Aeneid. I'm reading a lot of Latin at the moment.
Oh, the Aeneid.
About Aeneas, about Dido, and about the history of the Mediterranean. And
well, in Virgilio, in the Aeneid, I think in English, there is that wonderful image of Aeneas that escapes the fires of Troy with his father, and kisses on his shoulders and his son on his hand. I mean, that is also a statue from Gian Lorenzo Bellini, Bernini, I'm sorry. But that's exactly what you're talking, right? Our culture is a culture of shielding the elder and protecting the younger. So the culture, tradition that we are maybe jeopardizing through choices.
Yes, yes, it's complicated. It's that also, and also, you know, he left behind his wife, and she died in the fire. So I'm being a feminist. I'm interested in the voices of women in antiquity. So I'm, you know, I admire the great heroes, and I'm a classicist. It's my first degree, but now I'm thinking about all these stories from the opposite side. So what happened to Creusa, his wife? Right. What happened to Dido? Why is she so presented in that way? Thinking about patriarchy and empire. I'm thinking about Virgil as a sort of a propaganda poet, a wonderful poet, but also
absolutely
closely related to, and how we create the other, the East, you know, North Africa and Phoenicia. They are the other. They are the not European. They are the non-Roman. Also the feminine element in that, you know, Dido. So I'm really interested in all these constructs, and I think if we don't stop learning about our histories like that, we will not solve the migrant problem. We have to think about colonialism. We have to think about empire and patriarchy, and try and express that and care about that in the choices that we make, in the repertory choices that we make. And because how else are we going to change people? How else are we going to show a different perspective to young people growing up watching these prototypes on the stage? So I'm really into that at the moment, and into what Greek and a Roman myth can tell us about that, but also what the flaws are there, you know, what are the dangers. So
in a way, you are talking about the classical mythology and focusing on what the classical mythology may have left behind, or maybe those obscure zones in this culture, classical mythology and classical culture that is at the base of our Western civilization, in which there are holes, and in those holes are often filled by the presence of women whose stories have not been told. So this is your battle cry in a way. I don't know. In Italian we say grido di battaglia. I don't know in English how to say.
And of course, I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, there's a tradition for that, and I think before this, there is at the moment, I think, a very, very big trend. It's a bad word, but for women writers to look at myth and epic poetry in particular, because tragedy, there's a lot of women in Greek tragedy, but in epic, it's a very male genre, and it's a foundational genre. I mean, everybody knows the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid. So not everybody, but I mean, many people, even if they don't know it, they know the reception of it, they know something about it, or the ideas behind it, or the system behind it, the ideology behind it. So right before the lockdown, we were actually in London. We barely made it. We I left London at the end of February. We were doing this big event in the British Museum where we had this all-day kind of theatrical happening inside the Greek and Roman galleries that we organized with Project Season Women. We had 22 actresses from Cyprus and from the UK in all the different rooms next to the statues and the exhibits, reading a novel, so from the morning until the afternoon, but happening simultaneously in several locations, that tells the story of the Trojan War through the women's perspective. So that's the last thing, the big sort of feminist thing that we did in terms of myth right before the lockdown. It is a book by Natalie Haynes called 1,000 Ships. And it tells the story of the Trojan War only through the female characters. And it actually starts with Creusa, Aeneas's wife, how she dies in the burning city. And I was so shocked, I tell you, and I felt like such an idiot when I read the novel. When it's the first chapter, and I've always loved Virgil and the Aeneid, and then I've always been moved by the image of Aeneas carrying his father on his shoulders and his little son, and then I never thought to question what happened to her. Of course, you know, Dido talks about her in Ovid and in the Aeneid, says you left her to die. But we tend to forget. And I know these things, I've read them and still I forgot them. So I think it's important to remind ourselves that the main narrative is from a male perspective, and we need to question that always. So that's the thing that we did right before the lockdown, and we were hoping to go to other museums in different countries to do it as well. Maybe one day we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, probably, hopefully soon, because this seems to be a very important project.
Yeah, it was powerful and it was collaborative, and it brought people together from different nationalities, different cultures. It was in English, which is a world language, and there's nothing wrong with that. It was wonderful, but we could do it with subtitles when we have, we could do it in different languages, but it was really, it's an amazing book, 1,000 Ships, and Natalie Haynes really is committed to giving voice to female heroines from the classical world, and she does it with a light touch and in a really accessible way, and with a lot of heart.
So just to finish, obviously this is a project that is very close to you. It probably maybe more relevant because from what I read all over the world, due to the lockdown, many women have encountered violence within their homes.
Yes.
And can you comment on that? Was that a problem in Cyprus? I know it was a problem
Yes.
in the Mediterranean, in Italy, in many places.
Well, I know that there have been, as soon as the lockdown began, there was an increase of calls for incidents and requests for help for domestic violence. Yeah, and that was just a fact. There were more incidents reported. And it's not just domestic violence. I think it's other more insidious ways in which gender appeared as an issue during this. For example, it was immediately assumed that women had a more flexible schedule and were going to take care of the kids now that schools were shut. And it was really interesting because when, you know, the reopening was gradual. You know, some government agencies opened and then some other businesses. And then the government said mothers with children are allowed to not come back to work or come on and I thought, what about fathers? I mean, those kids also have a father, you know, so and then they changed it because they felt bad. I mean, it was, why is it assumed that I don't want to go back to work because I have a kid. I mean, it's not just about, maybe I love my job and I'm passionate about it. Maybe, it's complicated. So it is a Mediterranean society. So we have these stereotypes. I was also, I don't know if I should say this, but I will say it. I was disappointed that the first new production that is going to be staged here in Cyprus by the National Theatre is an all-male cast. So right now, nobody's working. It's a big privilege to have a job in the theatre. And the first play is going to be 20 men in the cast and 10 in the creative team, and then only one woman is employed by that. So I think there should be more concern for diversity, especially at times like this.
Why did you think you should not say that?
What?
Why did you think that you said, I don't know if I should say that?
I'm happy that people are working. I'm happy that theaters are reopening. I know that it is better than in other countries where nobody's working. We have ancient amphitheaters, we have open air amphitheaters, we have the Greek plays that we do every summer. So this is an Aristophanes. So we have this opportunity. And a lot of the people making this play are my close friends and collaborators, and I love them, and I'm really happy that they're working. But I also think there should have been more concern for diversity, especially now, when there is literally no other new plays happening this summer. So, I mean, there will be eventually, but the rest of us have only just begun preparing for rehearsals and thinking about, we have until September, October to do something, and then we'll see what happens. So,
but obviously, it sends a signal where that everything's going to be back to normal, and we're going to open this season with 20 males on stage and only one female involved. That's a very powerful signal.
It is.
It's been sent to every artist, and I know, actually, I don't know how you feel because I am a male, so I can never understand, be in your shoes. But obviously, this is something infuriating in a way.
Yes.
It must be very so. So just to close, what do you think is the role at this point that you will play in this charge of repositioning theater within the community, and the role of theater in telling the stories of the marginalized, this idea of theater for social change that is very dear to me, because that's what I do also. So I can learn from you too, in terms of what is the role of there?
Well, I think we need to study, and we need to work as much as possible with people who are from these groups. I'm not pretending, I don't think I'm particularly marginalized or particularly downtrodden because I'm middle class, and of course I have the female experience, which is it is infuriating. It does have an impact on my economics and my career, but if I'm going to do a project, for example, about the migrants in the Mediterranean in ancient times, I need to be talking to actual people who have this experience. I think that's one thing. And now we are trying to collect stories of women. With Project Season Women, we are exploring a particular historical moment in Cyprus in the 1980s, where there was a big feminist movement in relation to our political problem that we have here. As you know, it's an ongoing conflict. That has not been resolved since 1974 with Turkey. And so we have, the island is divided. There's refugees from both sides. There's missing persons from both sides. So we are, we're researching a particular moment in time in that, and we are conducting interviews, and we're trying to see the hidden stories of women in terms of this conflict. So we're interviewing now and looking at footage. Interesting detail, there has never been a woman negotiator in the peace talks with the Turkish Cypriots and with Turkey, ever. There was never been a woman at the table. Women have been, lost their husbands and their sons on both sides. Women were raped, women suffered, women were refugees, but they were never at the negotiations. They were frequently at demonstrations. They were frequently in feminist movements related to that, but they were never part of the official. So we're doing research on that. That's going to take years, but we're trying to learn from these people, because we were born after the war, so we have a different experience. We need to know more, and we need to know from the generations that came before. So I think theatre for social change needs to have this authentic voice. It needs to have an authentic an engagement with the first-hand knowledge. Whoever has that first-hand knowledge, we need to find them, and they need to be involved. Otherwise, it would lack authenticity. And I think it's difficult, and it needs funding.
Right. Yeah. So we are doing this project, and we are interviewing refugees from Africa that they are now in shelter at the Comunità Sant'Egidio in Catania. So we are interviewing them and collecting their stories. We started using really the basic theater for social change approach, allowing that, sorry. Asking them if they would share their stories with us, and then recording those stories and sharing the stories with others, and creating plays and performances. So if you want, I can share with you the contact. And it's interesting that in Italy, I think Italy has done a fantastic job protecting and helping migrants coming from Africa, and with the only problem of the period of last summer, when Salvini, the right wing, was in the government and stopped our organizations from helping them. But it's very interesting that they are the male are in one place and the females are in different places. They have been separated by gender, and this is quite something quite interesting. And
so how do you call them? Sorry, how do you conduct the interviews? Do you call them, or what do you?
We are going to have interviews via Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, but we were there last summer, so we have already met some of them. So we have sort of personal relationship with them. We wanted to be with them and not only listening to their stories, but with them creating performances that would tell their stories. Because in theater for social change, I realize it's not only theater in itself is too limiting. We need to expand to performance, which means incorporating, as much as we can, the dance, the music, the physical, the movement, and also the visual arts in so many ways, because that allows us to a wider range of creative expressions. That's why we talk about performing human rights more than theater and human rights. So that's something, and also because we notice that migrants or refugees often relate to performance more than theater. So they tell their stories to performance. Mythology is often an expression of performance, as far as I know. So that has been interesting for me to discover. So if you want, I can put you in touch with them, or obviously more than happy to share with you the interviews, the videos of the interviews.
That'd be wonderful. Yes.
Yes, I'll do that. We are going to start conducting these interviews at the end of this week. So I will love to share them with you. So I'm going to add you to the drive where everything is held. So you will be able also to see the interviews with others. But let me just, in this moment, let me stop the recording so that I can just explain to you that. So thank you very much, Magdalena. And let's talk a little bit more about some logistics.